My name is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, Technology Competencies and How to Exceed Them, and this one is geared toward all levels of staff. So it's presented today by Heather Rayl, Director of Technology and Special Services from the Vigo County Public Library, and Katherine Huddle, Computer Training Support Specialist from the Carmel Public Library. So just a few housekeeping items before we start. If you have sound issues during the webinar, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box. If there's a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issue you're experiencing, we are recording the webinar and you can watch it offline after it has ended. Again, if there's a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in this chat box. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. I'll be watching and will get your question to Heather and Katherine as soon as there's a good opportunity. And there will also be time near the end for questions. The session today is worth 1 TLEU and your certificate will be available for download at the end of the webinar. If you are watching an archive recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU in the video's description in YouTube. Also, today's webinar will be recorded and archived. After this webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's Archive Webinars page. And just a reminder, for weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. Now we'll get started, and I'm happy to turn the presentation over to Heather and Katherine.
Hold on just a second, guys. We're getting the screen sharing going.
All right, hi everyone. Good afternoon. This is Katherine Huddle with the Carmel Public Library. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about what we do at our library so that we can give you some more information about technology competencies. We'll also look at what are 21st century skills and how you can develop your list of competencies for your library. We'll also give you some good resources for finding technology training, and one of the things that we love, our good friend Google, and how to develop your Google foo. So my name is Katherine Huddle, and I am the Computer Training and Support Specialist at the Carmel Public Library in Carmel, Indiana. I've worked in the IT department for 7 years, and this is Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Rayl. I'm the Director of Technology and Special Services at the Vigo County Public Library in Terre Haute, Indiana. I've been at Vigo County Public Library just over a year. Before that, I was at Indiana State University, and before that, I was at the Los Angeles County Public Library.
We did want to let you know that if you have any questions this afternoon, please feel free to pipe up in the chat and we'll try to respond to you as we go along. All right, so if you can see the hand raise icon on your screen, could I just see a raise of hands for who already is using technology competencies at your library? Even if you've tried in the past and it hasn't been successful, you tried and you gave up, or you just had them years ago and you haven't updated them. Okay, so I've seen a lot of hands. All right, well, I wanted to share today the competency checklist that we created at our library. We started on this about 7 years ago in a committee called Organizational Innovation. And this actually came down to us as a directive from our board. And our board wanted us to start implementing 4 hours minimum continuing education every year for all level of staff. And we felt that it was really important for us to better serve our patrons and to just develop our professional skills, that even if you were an MLS librarian or a paraprofessional, and I hate that term, but even if you were an adult page here at the library, that everyone had the opportunity to learn 4 additional hours throughout the year. So once we had that directive for the learning, what were we going to learn? So we sat down with management, with staff, and we actually found out, what does everyone do? What do you need to know in your job that's pertinent, that makes your job easier? What are your basic requirements? Some of this information could even come from your job descriptions, although if you haven't looked at those in years, things have changed, as we all know, especially with technology. So creating your competencies, I'm going to be honest with you, it may take a while. You're going to have to speak and communicate with people from all over your library. We want to go ahead and share this list. I've shared this with ILF, and if you were at ILF last week, I did a session on this. And we had a lot of people stop by. It's a hot topic right now, and I think it's really important to get all of our staff up to speed and at the same level. And my big thing here at Carmel is always just saying, if you're a frontline staff member, we want every patron to have a consistently excellent frontline experience with all of our staff. And that comes back to the root of everyone needs to be trained on some basic things. So some of the options that we have here for competencies would be things like computer basics. So do your staff know how to operate a CPU? Do they know what CPU stands for? Logging into computers at your library. Lots of different things, and if you want to browse that, we do have that available through Google Drive. A lot of other libraries are implementing these technology competencies. We can see here from Charlotte-Mecklenburg County Library, they also use a technology competency checklist that's pretty similar to ours. And this comes from really the corporate world, from medical fields. Lots of other businesses are using these types of technologies to evaluate and assess where their staff are with the skill set that they need to have to survive in 2018, 2019, and beyond. When we were looking to create our own competencies, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We knew that there had to be a base checklist that we could go with to work from, so we actually found back in 2014 something from WebJunction and IMLS, the competency index for the library field. We've included the link here, but this is a PDF that lives on the web, and we took a lot of our competencies straight from here and just adapted them for our library. So when we talk about technology competencies, we really want to drive home to you and stress the importance of these are customizable. This is going to be completely dependent upon the technology that your library has. So your staff, in terms of what they need to know for the tools you use, if you have self-checks and what brand they are, your ILS, and what your community uses. So for example, in Carmel, our community, I know that our patrons are Apple users. We have a huge number of Apple users, so we expect our staff to be able to be comfortable and knowledgeable with Apple devices. So that competency checklist from WebJunction is a great place to start to get an idea of how to establish your competencies for your library. Our competencies are job level specific, so our levels go to 11 if you get the joke. But even if you are a student page, adult page, or our library director, you have individualized competencies for your role here at the library. So that really does mean sitting down one-on-one and communicating with all levels of your staff to find out what tools they're using on a daily basis. And that may vary really wildly. For example, I didn't know that our finance director uses some really advanced accounting software. So even if you're in the IT department, you need to know all of the types of technology that your library offers, even if that means digital signage. So these competencies are tied to specific skills and tasks. You need to know how to do your job, and also just good organizational awareness. Do you offer printing or fax machines at your library, and who knows how to use them? If someone is sick, do you have anyone on staff who knows how to use it? These competencies need to be evaluated. As we get rid of older technology or introduce new technology, they are living documents, and as such you need to keep those updated as things move over time. Also, those job descriptions we mentioned, go back and look through those. This is a great way to not only update those older or existing job descriptions, but to tie in new technology.
So this is Heather. I wanted to put a plug in for this concept of 21st century skills. This is a list that was developed through a grant by the IMLS, Museums, Libraries, and 21st Century Skills. And this is just a little section of it having specifically to do with technology. And you'll notice that these aren't really specific skills, and I want to see if this works. Yep, I'm trying to load the page. It's being real slow. I might give up here in a little bit, but anyway, we will make sure that these slides are available for you. Yeah, it's not going to load. Available for you after the slideshow. But basically, this is a giant list of really soft skills that sort of describe the techniques that you need in order to operate in today's world. So you'll notice like this one that specifically has to do with technology. Use technology as a tool to research, organize, evaluate, and communicate information, right? So it doesn't tell you which technology to use or what apps or what programs or whatever to use. It just says that you need to be able to do this, and it's kind of up to you to figure out how to do it. And this list encompasses not only technology, but other kinds of soft skills like using data and self-evaluation and those kinds of things. So I would highly encourage you to take a look at this list when you're thinking about what you need to be focusing on at your library and on you personally, because all of these skills on this list are extremely valuable in today's world. So many of you may have logged into this webinar thinking, oh, they're just going to give me this great checklist of stuff and then I'll know exactly what to do. Well, unfortunately, we can't tell you what to do. Like Katherine was saying, you need to decide what you don't know. So I'm sure you've had that moment sitting at the desk or wherever you sit, maybe you're answering the phone, and you hope and pray that somebody doesn't call or ask you that one question. Because you really don't know how to do it and you mess it up every time someone calls you or asks you that one question. Maybe it's how to check out a book on Libby, or maybe it's printing from the Wi-Fi if you have that in your library. So I'm sure in your heart of hearts you probably have one of those questions. Guess what? That's a competency that you need to know how to do, and it's going to vary by position. And it's going to vary by person. So, you know, even if you're at the same level, one person might be better at something than the other person. So we can't really sit here and tell you exactly what your competencies and your skills should be. They really need to come from you, and they need to be in conjunction with your managers. And like Katherine said, you probably should take a look at your job description as well. When you're trying to think about, well, what do I need to know? How do I even start? You can sort of make a list of the stuff that you have and that you offer in your library. So do you have photocopiers? Do you know how to use all the functions on the photocopiers? Do you have databases? Do you know how to tell people how to use Inspire? Those kinds of things. Do you have a fax machine? What kind of downloadables do you have? What kind of equipment do you have? Do you have a microfilm machine? Are you in an area of the library and you might ask to be used, might ask to help someone using it? Maybe you should know how to do that. Do you know the basics of the software that your library and your customers use? So some libraries kind of offer the same kinds of software to their customers as well as the staff. Do you know kind of the ins and outs and the basics of using those pieces of software that are most common? Those are the kinds of things when you're thinking about your own competency list that you need to think of to sort of develop what you need to work on. You can also ask your colleagues. Another thing, if you don't even know, if this doesn't help, maybe make a list of the questions that you're asked to do every day, or make a list of the things that you do. What are your daily tasks? What are your weekly tasks? What are your monthly tasks? A competency generally is something that you're going to have to do pretty consistently, so make sure that you know it's part of your job. Also, sorry. So what questions, again, do you dread when you're working on the desk or you're answering phones? That's something that's just really, really important. Or is there something that you routinely turn over to someone else because you just never learned how to do it? I know there's stuff in my library that I don't know how to do. I have to admit, I don't know how to issue a library card. But that's probably not going to be one of my competencies because I never staff that desk. I don't know how to use the cash register. I don't even have a login for the cash register. But I'm never going to staff that desk, so that's not one of my competencies. So the last thing to sort of keep in mind when you're coming up with these things is that it's really actually very hard to break a computer. And so don't be afraid to click on things and explore. And if there is something that you could break, probably your IT staff have locked that down and you can't even get to it. So don't be afraid to just click on things sometimes. You actually learn quite a bit just by doing that. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about developing your list and how you go about doing that. And we have a list that Carmel Clay actually uses for their tech assessments that you can download from Google Drive. And it's based, again, on that competency list that they developed that ILF has been using. But again, you need to figure out what you need to do. So take a look at your job description, write down what you've been doing every day. What are the things that break you out into a cold sweat when you're asked to do them? That's going to be your basis for your technology skills. Take a look at that Web Junction list. But again, it might have some stuff in there that you just don't do. So just always be aware of tying it back to your position. That's the most important thing. We just really like this quote, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." You need to have a plan. And developing that competency list is your plan. That's going to keep you on task so you know what you're going to end up with at the end.
This is Katherine over at Carmel Clay, and I just wanted to share with you for a few minutes some information about creating a learning plan for you. So once you take some time and you've actually created those technology competencies, what do you do with those? Here's the information that you need to know, but how are you going to learn it, and how do I know that you're learning it? So we use here at Carmel Clay something called an Individualized Learning Plan, or an ILP. And once you have those competencies established, what we do here at our library is that we invite staff to self-assess and survey themselves. So with that checklist ranking from 1 to 5, can you teach someone else how to do this skill, or do you have no concept whatsoever of what I am talking about? So we'll find some gaps there, and sometimes we see patterns where maybe a whole department missed out on training for a new phone system or for a printer upgrade. So we can actually create some goals here and create SMART goals. So for example, we did recently update and we moved to a print kiosk, a print release station here at our library. It was a big change for most of our staff. And we wanted to make sure that even if you are walking the floor, you are on adult page, you have an organizational awareness that yes, the library offers wireless printing, and here are where the printers are located, information like that, in case they are stopped on the floor by a patron. So with these individualized learning plans, you could take some information from those self-assessments that are based on the checklists and start small, say maybe 1, 2, or 3 goals per year. And the learning objective may be something like identify where you can locate downloaded books in the Overdrive app. Maybe your staff member self-reported that they are a 2 on this, they can barely do this. So that's a good goal to work on for the next year. So an action that could come from this, maybe they are going to practice with the app. We have something here at our library called a Tech Tinker Box. It sounds fancy. It's a plastic shoebox from the dollar store. I went out and got it, and we have some older devices and some troubleshooting guides and some role-playing games stuck in this little box, and staff know that they can come anytime and request that. They can even take it home and practice if they want to. So maybe one action would be, I'm going to play with the Tech Tinker Box with the Overdrive app for 30 minutes next week and just familiarize myself with the buttons within the app. My target date is I would like to do that by the end of the month, and then you go back in to this document. That's why I say these are living documents, and you update the date and time you did this. Why do I ask that we create SMART goals for these learning plans to help work on our competencies and build up these skills? Because if you don't come in and set a date, you're never going to do this. This needs to be scheduled time. When I sit down with our staff and we work on formulating these plans together, We usually sit down for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and I give them some resources and some suggestions on what those actions could be. And then at the end of the year, they have a whole year to work on their progress towards these goals with all of the learning opportunities and resources that we're going to talk about this afternoon. And the criteria for success is clearly outlined in this document with staff. That if this is Heather, Heather is going to be able to show me physically, demonstrate how to get to the bookshelf in Overdrive as if I was a patron. Show me how to do it. And we'll rank her on a scale, and if she is completely unable to do it, we know we have some work to do. But these learning plans are a great place to start to help create those goals to work on throughout the year. And if this is your first time trying this at your library, start small, just 1 or 2 things that are very important for your staff to do. So if you have a staff member, if you discover through the self-assessment, they self-report that they are unable to copy and paste. You may say, I know my staff, and that is not an issue you have. Or you may be sitting there saying, I know my staff, and this is an issue we have. It's private. These learning plans, these competencies and checklists, the competencies are public for that level of staff. So all of my level 7 staff know that this is what I expect of you in terms of technology skills. But what you're working on, what your goals are for technology, that's private. So that gives a safe space to be able to work to develop these skills. And when you go to find that training, you really also want to start with, how do you learn best? If you're working on your professional development, we don't all learn the same. And for example, for me, I'm terrible at webinars. I don't like going to webinars, and I don't do well with in-person training. I love digital learning and MOOCs and self-paced learning like Gale courses and Linda. I really respond well to that because I can stop, learn a little bit, really process that information and go back and maybe do it a second time. So think about what types of learning work best for you. We have a document through Google Drive that we'll have available here, and also Paula can send out this afternoon after the webinar. But there's so many free resources available to library staff, especially in Indiana. WebJunction is a great place to start. TechSoup webinars. I hope everyone knows in this room that through the Indiana State Library, all levels of library staff have free access to lynda.com.
That includes part-time staff as well as full-time staff. All you have to do is fill out this very easy form on the State Library's website to get access.
Your facilities manager, your director, everyone has access to this. And these are self-paced courses. I keep hearing from staff, and I know it's so hard when you're on a public desk, how difficult it can be to find time if you're scheduled 6 or 8 hours on a desk all week long. I love Lynda, and I recommend it to our staff because you can pause the videos, you can come back to them at a later date. They're closed captioned, they have transcripts. If you need to actually have activities to work alongside as you learn like I do, they have great exercise activities there, and these are free opportunities to take advantage of. There's no specific time date. You can come in and jump into a course at any time. And the big one for libraries is that these are regularly updated. So even if you're teaching the public how to use Microsoft Office products, I love using lynda.com and even Gale as a reference point to establish the public classes we do at our library. So there's good information on all sorts of technology in Lynda, and if your library offers Gale. GCF Learn Free is a resource that we recommend to our patrons along with Tech Boomers, and even Tech Boomers has information about Overdrive and Libby. So if you know you don't have time or resources to dedicate to create training or learning opportunities for your staff or your patrons on some topics that they're really important, you can always go back to these free websites. Allison and Digital Learn. We also implemented a change here where TED Talks that are relevant to your position or technology or library related will count as continuing education towards your goals for the year. So looking for some more informal opportunities like that.
So that's great. Thanks, Catherine and Heather, but how in the world am I supposed to find time to do this? Well, honestly, you just have to schedule it. There's really no other way around it. You can also just start small. So if you don't have very much time, schedule 15 minutes, maybe right before your lunch. I wouldn't recommend doing it like right at the end of the day because you might get interrupted or something like that. I like to do my training stuff kind of first thing in the morning because I'm still very fresh. Sometimes I don't even check my email. I'll just kind of dive right in. 30-minute chunks works pretty well for me. 60 minutes is great if you can carve out that kind of time. But you really do just need to be mindful, and you do need to schedule it. Like we mentioned, lynda.com courses come with transcripts and closed captioning, and the exercises and things usually are on programs that you have at your computer, so you can actually do these on a service desk if you have slow periods, because you can't sit there and tell me that after 7 p.m. you have droves of people coming in asking you questions, no matter what service desk you're at. There are slow times on your desk where you just are sitting there trying to figure out something to do. It's lovely if you are a manager and you can support your staff to provide time for training. Some of the managers at my library actually do schedule staff for off-desk time so they can complete training, and they're required to do training in that off-desk time. We also encourage staff to look for those kinds of more passive learning opportunities while they're on the desk. So maybe it's looking at library journal. Maybe it's looking at American libraries. Maybe it's looking at, I don't know.
Listening to podcasts.
Listening to podcasts. That's a little harder when you're on the desk.
Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, you can listen to podcasts when you're sorting books or shelving books, if you're allowed to do that on the floor. And like we said, chunk it into smaller segments. So often the biggest thing can seem really overwhelming if you have to learn, I'm trying to think of it.
This is Katherine, so I have a good one. So with our Overdrive and Libby competencies, there are probably a dozen different specific tasks that we expect most of our staff to be able to do. So when assisting a patron, one that comes up is, we see this with families when you have 3 different library cards. When you enter them into the Libby app, it just says library card, library card, library card 3 times. So how can you tell which library card belongs to which family member? Can you assist a patron in naming their library cards in the Libby app? If you know how to do this, raise your hand right now. Can you name a library card in the Libby app? You can do this. It's in settings. You tap on Libby's face. I know this because we all practice it. So this is also a good one. We hear a lot from people. I have staff who are really competent and they are my tech gurus. What do I have to offer them? You can create advanced goals for them too to work on things such as that. So with those Overdrive competencies, that's one where we've chunked it and we separate those out. So that's something that you could work on that's a small goal. So with tracking your training, once you actually find out those competencies of what you need to know to do your job and to do it well, and you've identified the types of training that you're doing webinars, you're playing with gadgets, you're going to conference sessions, whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you're keeping track of what you've learned. And one of the things that I recommend with our staff is that we use Google Sheets or Excel, and you just create a basic spreadsheet and track what you're doing. When are you doing it? I hate to see people binge learn. It's great that you're learning, but if you chunk it all in and you're doing like a staff day, 8 hours, and that's all you do for the rest of the year, we need to really encourage that culture of continuous learning. We try to offer that for our patrons with the programs we put on, but every 3 months I expect staff to have at least 1 credit. So we require 4 credits of continuing education per year, but some of our managers at their discretion go above and beyond that, and they'll require 1 a month, so 12 a year. So we really want to see learning spread out throughout the year, not like we have on this demonstration template here that somebody did 5 hours in 2 or 3 days. But this also gives you some opportunities to look back on the things that you did. We also encourage our staff to keep blogs of professional development. So if you do attend a webinar, write a little paragraph and share that with your coworkers if they were not able to attend.
And this kind of format is really nice for tracking if you have to earn a library certificate for the state of Indiana. This is also really nice. It can serve double purpose, track your LEUs and your TLEUs in this as well, so that you're not having to constantly try to count pieces of paper and things. Just type them in the spreadsheet, put in a formula. If you don't know how to use a formula in a spreadsheet, look it up and learn how to use a formula in a spreadsheet, so it'll add those things for you so you don't have to do it yourself.
And this is Katherine again, so feel free, that's just a template that we use, but feel free to make your own. And it's just really important to track that, especially for compliance for professional staff who are state certified.
So how do you evaluate your progress? If you're not aware in terms of like learning terminology, take a look at Bloom's taxonomy. This is a list of words, action words, that are actually really useful when you're writing your learning objectives too, because they're sort of levels of learning. So the basic level is like understand, and then you move on up, like can you evaluate it, can you teach someone else, and sort of the highest level is the most understanding thing. So like if you're working on Overdrive, you might start at that basic level, find how to name library cards in app, right? And that's your first goal. But maybe your next goal would be another word from Bloom's taxonomy, and it's a pyramid if you look it up, to try and find to teach someone else how to name it. Forms. Google offers Google Forms. You can use those as assessments. Like if you're developing a training for your library and you want to have people like take a quiz at the end or something, Google Form is a really easy way to do that. It'll keep all of the results in a single spreadsheet for you. There are other form programs out there, but Google is probably the most accessible as far as being free, etc. Individualized learning plans are also very helpful. Katherine talked about that a little bit, and then you want to do the rest of it?
This is Katherine again. So those EOI end-of-year mastery checklists. So once we have our staff self-assess themselves on those tech skills based on our competencies for their job level, we have those individualized learning plans. And all year long, 11 months, our staff have to work towards their goals from the learning plans. So at the end of the year, we can sit down one-on-one, again, a private session, and we have a checklist. So this mastery checklist allows a manager or training, HR, whoever's going to be fitting this role at your library, to sit down with that staff member and say, okay, it looks like your goal was to learn how to name library cards in the Libby app. Can you show me how to do that? And we'll rate you on a scale of 1 to 4, and then if additional work needs to be done at that time, we can assess that. And how do we assess that during the checklist? We do role-playing games. We have different scenarios where we can play things out. We use Kahoot a lot. I just used Kahoot at ILF twice last week, and I'm always surprised by the people that have never played Kahoot. That's a really fun, free, easy way to set up, to assess your staff to see how they're doing. We also compare those self-assessment scores year to year. So for example, if Heather said that she feels very confident, she's a 5 on our printer system, maybe things change and the next year she's a 3. It's just a skill she doesn't use very frequently. You'll be able to see drops in self-assessment scores or where things go up, which is really what you want.
So developing your Google Foo. Basically, use your librarian skills to find the things that you need to know. So even though forums and listservs can seem really intimidating, they're actually your friend because people have already asked the question that you have. I guarantee it. The internet is a big place and somebody's already asked that question. And don't be afraid to put many words in Google. How to add cells in Google Sheets will get you a result that's really quite specific. You may not even have to visit a web page. It might even tell you right there in the Google search results, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Often these tutorials online have great screenshots as well. IT people use forums and listservs, honestly, all the time. Whenever, it's not that we know everything, we just know how to look for things, and you don't have to be an expert in it oftentimes to do the thing that it wants you to do. And those error codes that your computer spits out at you, they do actually tell you things. That's why your IT people are always asking you to write them down, or what does the error code say, because it tells you exactly what went wrong, and then you can Google that error code. When you are looking for stuff online, you want to remember the CRAP test. Currency is the information current. That's particularly helpful when you're looking for computer programs. You want to make sure that it's the right version and things like that. Is it reliable? Who wrote it? What's the authority, the A? And then what is the purpose or the point of view? That's why I kind of like forums and listservs, because usually nobody really has money in that game. Like if you use, I can't think of what it's called, the giant, where people are always really snarky for
Reddit.
Programming. No, I can't think of what it's called. I use it all the time and I can't think of what it's called. But basically, those people aren't getting paid. They're just really good at explaining things and giving answers, and it's just this giant forum. I'm sure somebody will be able to tell me what it is. It's not Reddit, though. Reddit actually can be a good place to find those kinds of things, too. And Wikipedia actually is really good for that background stuff, because people have spent a lot of time writing technology articles. So recently I had to learn all about telephony, phone systems like PBX and VoIP and stuff, and I didn't really know very much about it. It was a giant gap in my technical knowledge. So I kind of started out on Wikipedia. First of all, what does PBX stand for? I Googled, what does PBX stand for? Or what is PBX? And it came up with a list, and I found the one that looked like something that was phone. It's a private box exchange. It's something that people use internally when you have a bunch of lines. Okay, that's great. So that was where I started. And I just kind of read up from there. Wikipedia is also very helpful if you've read something in a forum or a listserv that you don't understand. Then you can start Googling the terms inside of that. I've used this method a lot when trying to troubleshoot server issues, which is hopefully something you will never have to do. But it's still really helpful when you're trying to do a task that you don't know how to do. I saw someone earlier saying, oh yeah, it was Paula, she looks up formulas in Google all the time for Excel. Excel is really powerful, and it does a lot of really powerful things. I can never necessarily remember how to do them, but I kind of know what they're for, and so each time I have to look up to know how to do it. And it's not that you have to know it off the top of the head. You just have to know how to find where to do it, especially if it's not something that you're doing every day. Like, I don't do a pivot table every day. I know what it's good for, but every single time I need a pivot table, I generally have to look it up so I can remember, oh yeah, that's how you do it. So it's okay not to know everything right off the top of your head. But it's imperative that you know where to find the information, or at least know that you can look it up.
This is Katherine, and I just wanted to add a little bit on there. What Heather was saying is that I feel like as information professionals, we're under so much pressure when patrons do come to the desk or call in on the phone with questions, and we have this fear we don't want to sound incompetent. But I do have a good book recommendation for you. It's called I Don't Know, In Praise of Admitting Ignorance by Laura Cohen. That's one that I recommended to our staff, that it's okay to say I don't know, but let's find out together. If that means you're turning your computer monitor around and showing the patron how you're finding that information, or showing a coworker how you're finding that information, you're helping someone help themselves. You're helping them become more self-reliant with technology. That's just a great place to start. One of our competencies here at Carmel is actually that we ask our staff, do you know where to find more information? You may rank yourself the highest skill level on all of these other tasks related to this topic area, but if you don't know where to find more information when you run into trouble, we're stuck. So just also having that mindset of, I feel like I know where to find more information, and that may just be an organizational awareness issue again. We use an internal wiki where we distribute information. And we wanted to leave you with this quote, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And that's really the core of why we do all of this with the competencies and testing and assessments and training, so that our staff, they feel appreciated. We're investing in them so that they can grow as professionals and as librarians, and that they can better assist our patrons. That's really what it all comes back to, that by training them, they're happier at work. They know that it's not just I graduated, I have my MLS, and I'm sitting there. We have state requirements for a reason, and we want to help you be able to fulfill those expectations by the state, and also to be able to do your job and do it well. I don't want anyone at my library to feel like I'm dreading coming into work in the morning. My stomach actually hurts and I'm going to be sick because I'm so scared of that question from a patron, or that situation where I don't want a coworker to know that I don't know how to change the toner on a printer. And I think that it starts with management and boards and good managers saying, I want to help you be able to do your job to the best of your ability. So let me give you these skills, and let's find a path and a way to get you this information.
One of those 21st century skills that we talked about a little bit earlier is the ability to take the initiative and be a self-guided learner. And that's really what we're trying to get across to you, that you have this power in your hands, and we can't, like I said, we can't tell you what to do. We just can't, because we don't know what you do. You have it within yourself to decide and to know what you need to do to be the best at your job. And learning that in a self-guided way really is a 21st century skill that that you should develop, especially if you're going to be in the workforce for years to come. Employers will love you, even if you don't stay in libraries. I love it when our part-time or even our full-time staff move on to bigger and better things. You know, it makes me proud that I was able to develop them and help them find their passion, because their passion may not be in libraries, and that's okay. So just know that you have it within yourself, and it's an investment in yourself as well when you start working on specific goals and develop competencies, even if they're not technology. So that's kind of what we had for today. I have it in my notes that we were going to ask what should we Google, but since we can't get that function to work, you can just try that yourself at your library or at your home, wherever you are today.
So at this point, do you guys have any questions you want to ask Heather and Katherine? You guys have been really quiet today in the chat box. There we go.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Deirdre. Oh, somebody raised their hand, but I don't know what that means.
I would say if you've got a question, just type it in the chat box there so we can see it. We're all looking at the chat box.
Do you have any types of reviews available for the training sites you recommended? If you click on the link in the slide, or if you visit the link in that slide, we have like sort of annotations. You know, so it says lynda.com, and it tells you what lynda.com is and what we liked about it. So I hope, Amy, that answers your question. Yeah, so the annotations do have strengths and weaknesses and those kinds of things. But you're also welcome to write either one of us or call us.
Andrew, I see your question. When you're joining a new library and there are so many associates who are not familiar with 90% of their programs and services, where do you even begin?
Well, that's an interesting question. It depends on whether you're a manager or not. So if you're a manager, you're kind of in a position better to address that. If you're not a manager, I would say do your best to figure out what the programs and services are in your library and promote them, and maybe talk with your colleagues about them. If you are a manager, then you can lead your staff in having them become familiar with the programs and services that your library offers. Honestly, at my library, we say that our frontline staff are our best advertisement, because they're the ones who are seeing the customers who are walking in and out every day. So it really behooves you to train your frontline staff on the programs and services in your library and having them be familiar with everything. And so it might need to be a culture of change in your library. So that's kind of a big question that doesn't have a really easy pat answer, unfortunately. But I hope that helps a little bit. Andea asks, do you find that systems are more prone to adopt this system-wide? Again, it kind of depends on your library. Honestly, it's probably easier to adopt in a smaller library because there's less people to handle.
This is Katherine at Carmel Clay. Right now we're a single location with the satellite digital media lab, and we have about 100 staff or so, but we're getting our first branch in the next year. So we'll see how that works, transferring that out to a second location.
When I worked for the County of Los Angeles, we didn't have like a central thing to track learning. Eventually, the County of Los Angeles bought this giant LMS, stands for Learning Management System, that we sort of imported everyone into. If you are a mid-sized library, I wouldn't recommend that. I would definitely just kind of go with like a spreadsheet thing. But yeah, I mean, it's going to vary per your library, and it might just be within your own department. Like if you're a department manager and that's the only thing that you can control, then that's the only thing you can control.
Emily, if you are the tech savvy one in your department, how do you balance your own competencies with teaching and showing everyone else in the department how to hit their expectations? This was a big one at the ILF session I did last week, where you have someone who is that go-to tech person. They know that you're the expert, and people turn to you and say, oh, I know Emily can do it because she can do it so much faster than me and she knows the answer. Let me hand you off to her. Well, that's just bad customer service. You don't want to go around, we don't need 6 librarians to change a light bulb with this stuff. This is a really hard one, and for me, where I'm the one who's doing the technology training, my competency checklist for myself is so long, it's so unique compared to everyone else in the building, and my learning plan is so long. I have so many things to work on for myself, so I don't do a lot of downtime. When I do have downtime, I'm always learning something. I even had a staff member who did needlepoint, and I have a little plaque at my desk and it says, always be learning. So we're just always learning and trying to stay on top of it, but really think about what's the most important thing for you in terms of technology that you need to know.
And as far as if you are the tech person in your department, when you're training other people, when you're teaching other people, you might need to adjust your techniques. So especially when you're doing tech things. So what we do and what I do is the person who is doing the thing is the one touching the computer or the device or whatever, and you're hands off. You might tell them, look in the upper right hand corner, but you're not actually touching anything. It takes a great deal of patience to just sort of stand there and let people do the thing themselves. But they're not going to learn how to do the thing unless they're doing it. Adults learn best by doing. Also, having staff members take notes in their own words. So you might have lovely handouts, but if they're not taking notes in their own words, they may not understand it 5 days down the road. So that's another thing.
This is Katherine again. I just saw that Deb said that it took 2 years, a 6-person committee, and a culture change, but it's working. That's really what we had here at Carmel too, and it came down from the top, from the board. And with our 4 hours of required continuing ed every year, we do have a mandate that is directly tied into pay. So staff who do not reach that goal do not receive their annual pay increase. So we have that as well.
And that kind of ties in with Carol's question right after Deborah's question. What do you do if you have staff that's always handing stuff off? If you don't do any sort of performance review at your library and you're in a position to implement it, I would recommend that because if staff are required to do their jobs, and if they're not doing their jobs, then you have to address the fact that they're not doing their jobs, which usually means training. If they're still not doing their job after training, it might be time to make that tough decision and let them go. Or, it's basically the come to Jesus moment. You really need to do this. If you can't do this, you might be happier working somewhere else. Nobody really likes to hear that, but it sometimes is necessary.
And that's it. We're accountable. This is really driving staff to be accountable for their own learning.
Yeah. Have we missed any questions?
I don't think so. I think we stayed with it.
Okay.
Um,
Things kept popping up so quickly that
yeah, we had to back it up a little bit to keep up with everybody. So what I'm going to do right now, though, I'm going to bring up the LEU form. You guys still put your questions out here, and we'll stay on for about 10 more minutes, okay?
Emily, that's a good one. When you get called in the crisis, I had to dispel this myth that I'm a magical tech fairy that with wings that comes down and fixes printers. And it really was kind of what Heather said. I spent quite a while just putting my hands behind my back, and it was so hard not to just do things for people, but helping them learn on their own. If I tell you how to do it and you can actually demonstrate it, that helps a lot for them. There we go.
yeah, that really is key when you're teaching technology. Just keep your hands off of it.
And if you are the tech fairy at your library and you are getting resentful of getting all of the questions directed to you, one thing that we did, we had a lot of people in departments who were really great with technology, but they were getting handed off all of these patron questions and coworker questions. There are specialists now. So these are staff that we identified through surveys and self-assessments and went to them and said, would you be interested in being an overdrive specialist so that when we have these advanced questions, we can kind of have a tiered system and staff are comfortable going to you and you are okay with taking those questions. And I know one of the things that I did when I first came into my position in the IT department was that I was getting so many calls, and I kept a log of which departments, what types of calls and problems I was commonly receiving, and then I wouldn't answer the phone. So I know that sounds terrible, but when you get a call and you see it's them, I didn't answer the phone, and I found out that I gave them a minute, and they figured it out on their own.
Right.
So sometimes I call back 2 minutes later and say, I saw I missed a call from you. What's going on? They said, it's okay. We figured it out. We played with it and we found the printer jam. And yeah, I know
Guru system.
Huntington City also has that Guru system. Deb, you might, yeah.
That's where she's from.
Yep, that's a great process. And Deb, I know you guys have little stickers you put on your name tags to identify your staff who are your gurus. I love that too for recognizing staff.
Another thing that I do when I'm training technology is I kind of put the ball in the person's court. So like if they're trying to learn how to write a paper, these days Windows really kind of lays everything out for you. And so I put the ball in their court. Okay, you want to make this a heading. So let's go ahead and highlight that text. Now, where do you think you would go to make that a heading? And have them take the time to look for it. And that's something that you need to do too. You take the time to look before you just automatically think, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Because a lot of things, you just kind of have to poke at it. Again, like we said before, it's actually really hard to break a computer these days. Really hard, unless you're actually doing the programming. But, you know, and even then, you can always undo and go back. So just don't be afraid to explore and click on things. Try to break it even. That's what I like to do.
We do that. We actually have a local company called Edwin the Duck, and they create smart tech toys for kids. It's a smart duck. And they gave us some for free so that we could take them apart and find out how they work. So even things like getting your staff comfortable with the technology in the first place, anything that we do with our children's department technology, if it's Ozobots, I do a staff session on that. Usually the children's librarians already have some type of curriculum or handouts together, and I just adapt it in small ways for adult staff. And yes, I had adult staff, a room full of them, with coloring crayons on the floor playing with Ozobots, but they're getting comfortable with the technology.
Yeah, I really encourage you guys to look at those IMLS 21st century skills because so many of the things that we've been talking about are embedded in those skills. I think it's, I don't know, I'm just a big fan of those. What other questions do you have for us? We have a couple more minutes, 6 more minutes. Elizabeth, don't worry. We couldn't get Google to work. We have no idea why it wouldn't work. Whatever. It's technology. It's not going to work all the time the way you want it to. Roll with the flow. we'll have Paula answer the certificate. I believe that there's an LEU thing that popped up. And if you're watching it in a webinar, there's instructions on how to create that LEU after the fact. Thank you. Setting the process up in a larger system really will take you need to have your administration on board. And I would just say start small and start simple. Like using spreadsheets is really great. If you're not already doing performance reviews, maybe you need to start there. Maybe you need to start at updating everyone's job descriptions. If you haven't looked at that in even 5 years, I would say start there. See what everyone's supposed to be doing, figure out what their competencies are from there, develop it into some sort of review that you're already doing. The individualized learning plans and all those sort of icing on the cake things probably can come after. What you need to establish first is sort of that accountability piece, which really comes from performance reviews and making people responsible for learning the things that they have to know. And if it's not in their job descriptions, you know, that's sort of your base.
And this is Katherine from Carmel Clay again, and like what Heather said, with the performance reviews, these things from the individualized learning plan or your competencies, you can tie those directly into performance review goals. So for example, if you are in a circulation department and you have staff members who are veteran staff members, 15, 20 years, it is hard coming up with new goals year after year for staff who do the same responsibilities, and there are not a lot of new opportunities for technology advancement. Get them interested in different things. Get them a wider array of tech skills. Offer them classes on 3D printers through Linda. Do fun things like that, so when the time comes when you do adopt a new technology, they are not as fearful of it and they're more willing to try it.
Performance reviews don't matter. Well, you know, if you tie them to whether you keep your job or not, then it does matter. I mean, we don't get merit increases either. We do occasionally get a cost of living increase, so you might be able to tie that in. But if you tie your performance reviews to whether that person gets to keep their job, then it does start to matter.
And I think too, as we see a larger percentage of millennials entering the workforce, I know here at our library at Carmel, we've seen a lot of younger staff coming in, recent MLS grads. That millennial workforce, they're expecting different things compared to previous generations in terms of what job happiness. They want learning opportunities and growth and advancement for professional development. And we're looking at almost 50% of the workforce of millennials by 2020.
So we have like a couple more minutes if you have anything else.
Just thanks to everyone for being here today, also to our wonderful presenters.